There we go. Beautiful people. I've got the honor to introduce another beautiful member of our very own group here in Loving Life After Loss to you. For those of you who've missed out so far, I've got the beautiful Rob Abatecola sitting to my left virtually, and I would love to start with a quick introduction from Rob. We will share a little bit about his story and how he came to where he is now, which is quite amazing from my perspective. So Rob, thank you so much for being here and for being so courageous to step up in front of the spotlight and share a little bit about your journey of healing and growth. So welcome. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I don't know where to, I was in a difficult relationship. I think that was the big one, but it starts when, who I am. I'm a kid I was a kid that just wanted to do some beautiful things for the world. And I didn't know what that looked like, but it had to do with bringing hope and joy into the world because that was what I saw lack. And, I worked with youth. I've always studied human behavior and philosophy, and things came to a head in life. And so I found myself in my late 30s running a pretty good sized business, and we were doing really well, and things tanked. And the problem was it was a family business. I was working with my father. I wanted to help him out, help grow the business a little bit because he got set back a few years prior. I figured right around 45 I would step out, but things tanked, and it's just like you find yourself in this place because where it's like, how did I get here? Where am I actually? Who am I? Because I thought I understood. I had this trust available at work or at home, because at home, when I had difficulties, I wasn't receiving support and everything was just difficult. And I'm not one to point fingers. It's always like, what can I do about this situation? And there was a point where not everything is up to me. And I knew that then so well that I didn't realize the internal set of obligations that I had that were developed in me that made it hard to let go. And it was anguish. It was a dark time. Got separated with my wife, and we dragged that out 6.5 years. And, and after that, I realized I was still really hurting, and I realized I was kicking myself over how it affected my kids and my daughter, particularly. And I'm like,
Can I ask you something here? I'd like to pause it for a second. Oh, thank you. I'd like to pause here though for a second, because when you said, the separation, that was a really, really big thing for you, because there was a lot of love and a lot of hurt. And then there was a separation, and you said you dragged it out for about 6.5 years. I know that there are people listening to this story right now that think like, how on earth did you get out of a relationship that you found to not be healthy for you anymore? How do you realize that? Because it's not like a one day and then you're like, oh, I need to get out of this. There's an accumulation of events, of emotions, of so many things that bring you to the point where you're like, you know what, I think maybe we've come to an end with this, And I also want to point out, obviously, in the group that we're in right now, every loss is so different. Everybody's got their own loss, their own story. And I want to focus really on yours. How did you know, pardon the pun, that it was time to cut the losses and say, we need to go our separate ways, and how can I get out of this and heal from this? Because there's this huge journey that you went through. And I feel very privileged that I have watched a lot of your growth, a lot of your healing. And I'm just blown away by where you are right now, and hence we're sitting here on camera having this conversation. Can you share a little bit about this moment or these moments in your life where you realized something's got to change here. This is not healthy for either of us, including our kids,
For me, it was 2015 when I reached that point. We had been separated about a year, and she started, bringing up the idea of getting back together, trying to make it work. And I was telling her, like, it was before that, and we were trying to figure out how to talk, and it just, whatever she was trying to share was very hurtful to me, right? So it's not necessarily she was trying to hurt me, and I just remember being like, I was sitting on the kitchen floor, totally informal and kind of defeated, And I remember putting my hand on her ankle and saying, like, listen, if you gotta go, go. I just need you to be happy. Okay. I just need to, it doesn't. And I think that actually may have softened her, and we did try, and we went a few years, and that kind of did me in. And what it taught me, it taught me something about myself. And actually it taught me an immense amount of things about myself. Which came, like, there's a certain set of things that was just too difficult for me to say. But back then it was so difficult, it wasn't even in my awareness. And
wow.
And when we connected, it really helped stabilize and catapult me, because here I was, I was feeling complete loss. I lost my children, my business, retirement, and I had someone sitting with me, and I could feel that they were absolutely present, and I felt nothing but pure love and a desire for the best, and at least that was the space I felt that was held for me. And that was around 2019, and it was around that time I have to accept what's here, which took me some time, and just start living, making those choices, which were difficult. It's like, okay, well, I got nothing really keeping me. And so I started traveling,
I remember that point.
Yeah. I didn't want to run away. Like I did know that I needed to move on, and I did feel that it was going to take me away from home for a little bit.
Yeah.
And what I learned was I had an attachment to home and family. There was this idea of it, and I had to let go of that. And what I can tell you now is I was so good at mediating situations that, but I wasn't very good at getting what I needed from people that I cared about, because some kind of division in there was very upsetting for me, which goes back to childhood. And so because of that, there was a series of important things to me, or things that I thought were communicated and they weren't. So, at the end of the day, it all comes back to the self. And it came back to how I process it, and in realizing that, we take in, our senses take in all this information, and, we come out with a specific end result, but that's not necessarily what happened. Yeah. And everyone knows, you talk to someone else, you get a different story. You talk to everyone else.
I love it because it comes back to this, everything has the meaning that we give it, everything in life that you experience has the meaning that you give it to. Grief, loss, anything in life, even love, everything has the meaning that you put onto it. And that obviously stems from experiencing in childhood, how you grew up, how you learned to understand loss, love, grief, everything, and that was such a picture perfect example of what you just shared, and I really want to highlight that as well, the traveling part, because I too traveled after Rob died, like our Rob, obviously, and I took the boys and traveled around the world with them, and I could have not thought of anything better to do. Even in hindsight, it was the best decision we ever made. And I believe it is often that we need to remove ourselves from the acute situation where there are so many emotions, where it's really tricky to make sense of anything when you're so bombarded with all the external influences. That sometimes the best thing you can do is to remove yourself from that, to travel, to allow yourself an outside perspective when you've got
Yeah.
more distance from everything. And I can so see that that's what you've done, and it really did trigger a lot of change and a lot of growth in your life. Can you share a bit more about that?
It was I'll start by saying it was a process where learning to take my own advice. Because if I
I
was
love it. Yeah.
and because if I was working with someone, I could understand that, and there's no harm in it. Go find something good to do, and I did do that. I struggled with the idea of just leaving and traveling selfishly. But while I was pondering that, I found, this nonprofit organization. They wanted to do something good with sustainable living in Costa Rica, and
Mm.
I met with them. Sounded, well, let's give it a whirl. I mean, who knows? It was in 2020, the world was ending anyway.
Mm.
So it's like, well, what have I got to lose, right? It's like,
Yeah.
and, I figured I'd do that for 2 to 6 months if it was tough, but I would do no less, than 2 to 6 months. And after that period, it was probably about 4 or 5.
Mm.
I finished with it and I just stayed. I house sat for people, and then I traveled and did road trips and stuff into Panama. And, it was a good time, but it was actually incredibly uncomfortable. And that's
Mm.
what really highlighted this attachment to home and family. And that's the period that
Mhm.
I realized, like, I've had this idea, this mindset in me that is controlling me. And I had
Yeah.
learned to pay attention to this because before I went to Costa Rica, I lived for almost 2 years in a Zen monastery.
Mhm.
Not because I actually considered becoming a monk, but
Mhm.
all I knew is I needed to get out of the house I was in, because
Mm.
it was like pain and loss written in the walls. It
Yeah.
was like and I'm like, oh my God, this is killing me. And so what I did is I actually contacted the ex, because she was looking for a new place, and I offered her the house,
Mm.
uh, so that my daughter could finish school there.
Mm.
And so help circle me back around. Oh, what the trip did to me. So,
Mm.
and while I was in Costa Rica, I read this neurological fact, like when you get put in new situations, like your body goes into hyper learning mode, and it helps you.
Mm.
It was perfect for me to recalibrate myself, my sense of self, my
Mm.
sense of what I really want in life.
Yeah.
Um, and with that, it also includes going deep on or facing the things that really hurt. And I had
Yeah.
some things that were so painful, just brought out like a sense of rage in me. I couldn't, and it's not like I was going to hurt anyone. I was really raging on
Yeah.
myself. I
Yeah.
hated me. I hated what
Mm.
I failed to do. And it's like, which is not real. Like I actually
Yeah.
did a phenomenal job. And I realized now I took really good care of everyone. I just didn't
Mm.
know. And this really sucks. This really sucks. Like sometimes if something sucks, you're like, okay, maybe, but that's not everything.
Mm.
And it was really hard for me to acknowledge and come to terms where I could say, yeah, I could have done things better. Maybe it could have smoothed out,
Mm.
but probably not. I,
But
yeah,
also recognizing the things that you did do well, where you did have
yeah,
that realization, I did take care of everyone and I did a great job. I think that that is a really important moment also in your own healing, because I feel that every time we go through really deep adversity, through a loss in our lives, there is this thing that it brings up things from our childhood that we're not healed. For me, it was that feeling of not being safe. It was deeply re-triggered when Rob died, because all of a sudden I was on my own with 2 boys, and I had to make sure that I would feel safe. that I would protect them, because now I was the protector. And I recognized that so deeply, but only years later, through doing the work that I'm doing now, did I realize that is a complete normal thing. You know, when we experience adversity, it does bring up the things that are not healed. It re-triggers it. And rather than being defeated by it, I chose to embrace it and go like, oh, here's an opportunity to now heal that, to now shift the perspective around that, to now look at things differently and make different choices as well, you know. And also I'm an adult now. I'm not a child anymore. I can make sure that I feel safe. You know, I have the tools available to me. And I'd love to hear if you experienced that too. Did you have these triggers that brought you back to things that were unhealed from your childhood, where you had moments of, hey, I'm an adult now, I've got tools, I can deal with that, I can look at things differently? Did you experience that?
Yeah, but for me, it was very complex because I had been on this journey. So I understood about taking complete responsibility for myself in any situation, you know, and if it didn't go well, you know, I would find, well, okay, how could that have gone better? Right. And so, and when I face things, it's like I faced a lot of anxiety growing a business, you know, like, oh, can I do this? Am I able to? And dealing with these corporate sharks, you know, that never really answer your question legitimately, you know, and frustration. It's like, when the family business went down, there was something that I knew from working with people, because I coach people, and right now I work heavily with youth and young adults. Youth or people who are going through life shifts. A lot of people going through divorce and or loss in business. And so where was I? I blanked. Help circle me around, because I digressed. No, seriously.
I think it was more like the, you know, have you had things re-trigger? Yeah.
Yeah, it was complex because, and so it was difficult. Like, I had an understanding of those things when they surfaced. And over the last 2 years, especially the last year, I had some things that really surprised me, you know? And so, like, you know, certain memories of things that happened when I was a kid, and it left some kind of a, you know, what triggers you isn't really what happened, right? It's that memory in the body of something that felt like. And so sometimes these triggers would come up, and because I had so much associated with family, work, and church, it's like when one thing came up, it would seem like I was fighting 5 different things. I'd just be like confused. I mean, at days, like, and literally, I remember there was a time about 4 years ago, maybe 5. It's like, I didn't want to, it's like, certain conversations I learned to just not avoid, because it was going to take me out for 6 weeks. Like, I remember there was a time where I was like carrying a heavy anxiety for up to 6 weeks. Like, I hadn't let it go. I'm like, dude, you know, what is wrong with you? But that was during a very confusing, tumultuous time. I'm coming through it now. What I can say is, you know, they're all there. Everyone has them. And it's scary. But the scariest things never actually happen to us. Like, we can imagine far worse. You know, everything that happens. I mean, I've been in my lowest point, I was like, whatever, it can't get any worse. And it actually did. and I was like, and I actually found a sense of relief in it, because I had learned to look for good things over the, you know, my lifetime between 20 and 50, you know, just everyone, it's easy to be negative. So every time there's a negative thing, I would respond to it with, well, you got that, even if it was ridiculous.
It is,
so
I have to,
yeah,
sorry. I just want to share something quickly. I was smiling because it brought back a meme that I saw when I was, I think, a teenager, and it sort of stayed in the back of my mind, and you just re-triggered that for me. And I remember that meme said something like, I have to translate it because it was in German. It was something like, and I heard a voice in the background that said, smile and be happy because it could be worse. So I smiled and I was happy and it got worse. and and that's exactly what just
I
got
love that.
re-triggered when you said that. I'm like, oh my goodness, that is just so, I laughed about it back then, but sometimes it's really how that happens. We think we hit rock bottom and then there's this extra level. Yet I think what matters the most is what we do when we hit that extra level, what decisions we make there and then, what tools we use there and then. And I can only say from an outside perspective, because Rob, you, like a few others in this group here, are part of the Happy Healing membership, and that's where we catch up every 2 weeks for accountability, for checking in, for sitting with each other and reminding ourselves of how far we've come and what tools we can use. And all of us in Happy Healing have noticed this amazing shift in you, like a really very clear shift in you over the past few months. And I'd love to talk about that. I'd love to hear from your perspective what happened in those months, because I know that there was quite some time where you felt a lot of heaviness, where you felt like you were walking through mud and it felt intense to go through the healing. Yet you never gave up and you tried very many different things and you showed up for your own healing. And I watched you show up over and over again. And then all of a sudden there was this shift. And I'd love to hear from your perspective what you felt and what you feel that happened in your life when we all noticed it.
I had to start embracing the lies. And what I mean by that is there are things that are true that feel like a lie. It's against what I've seen, what I've witnessed, what I learned growing up. And I just would be like, lie to yourself then. If it's true, then lie to yourself. To get past that feeling. And like a year ago from now, a little over a year ago, I started this ridiculous affirmation thing. Like, I'm wildly supported. People want me to be where people give me resources. You know what I mean? It's like I'm supported in everything I do, and it's just like, I know that. And I kept stating the lie until it started to feel true. It felt peaceful. I'm like, it's okay. And then I was able, what happened was by doing that, which is, you got to be forceful because our habits are strong and the unconscious always tries to go back to the way it was. And that's where I got to get out of. And so,
bloody unconscious, hey?
yeah. And learning to understand that, I studied, and, it was my practice. I had a lot. I studied deeply into yoga. I also got trained in it and studying the Zen, Buddhism, connecting dots with all kinds of religions, following the common denominators. And it's like, back to this one thing I always told myself, but before I hit this tumultuous time, was like, I'm no better than anyone else and no one else is any better than me. So like there's nothing I don't have a right to accomplish or do or try. There was never failure in it. And I had to re-embrace, I had to remind myself of my old self. When I would go deep, I would try and get quiet and center my thoughts. And I kept having this sense of go back to the beginning. It showed me and kind of the kind of energy I had when I was 20, where, I had anger, but I was being just, and I had a deep relationship, a spiritual relationship, a deep practice at the time. It's like I could stand against anything. At least I felt like I could. And it took me till I was 39 to hit the one that could knock me off my saddle. And with that, I mean, honestly, you'll have to ask me the question again, but it just opened up a whole side of me that needed to be unlocked, unleashed. And like things that I had learned, like I don't, no one cares about your feelings kind of a thing. I realized like that came out of a relationship that wasn't functioning well, and, that relationship always correlates to something in what we witnessed, the relationships we had as a child. They're not all the same, and everyone has good intentions, but I still, you end up feeling that way. And so, and I'll go back to when this support thing, when I was affirming support, and I just learned I had to be open, and I developed relationships. I had a relationship when I was in Costa Rica. Wasn't looking. That was the big thing, is I quit looking. And when I focused on myself, people come along. And as soon as, if I start messing with that, thinking I got to do something, then I mess it. And so I mess it up. And I received support, but I also had a really hard time letting go of some stuff. But I felt the push to leave and come back to the United States. And I had some friends I had developed over Zoom, and they were like, come on down here. They were in Florida. I said, I'll come by for a visit. I'll stay for a week, maybe a few months. Who knows what, and they wanted to do some stuff, work together on Zoom platforms, and even some coaching and healing work here. And so I went, and just going through it. And whenever a confrontation comes, it's like, buck up. And I speak. I speak to spirit. I can speak to God now. I had a really hard relationship with that word. But I understand it's all one. It's just, it's like, just make me available to be of service. To the real purpose. If there's no harmony, there's not trust, nobody can get anything done. So it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. Get that. Understand that right and wrong can only relate, to something you did in the past. So how can we do this going forward? Can we? And I learned that pretty hard with my marriage, because there were certain things that we could agree upon, but habits would always keep bringing it down around. And I don't know, I had that sense of, I was really surrendered. But I'll tell you, it was 2017. I can tell you, I had given up. I was so broken. I was down. I had my face buried in the carpet, crying and begging to go home. I couldn't bear another day here. And so, and I've learned, like I said, buck up. It's not, I hated that whole term of like, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, you need support. But there was a sense of approaching really sensitive emotional situations, and like, it's a big picture, maybe pick one thing and face it. And then, if it hurts too much, back off. Okay. Make sense of it. For me, it was trying to understand how things went the way they did. But and that,
so it was a literal step by step, just taking it one thing at a time, rather than, because so often people are in overwhelm because they try to solve everything at the same time, and they're in the thickness of emotions, and it is really tricky for them to find this the way out of the step by step, how to even start that, how to even approach that. So Rob, when you look at it back then, that probably one of your lowest points in life, the 2017, with your head in the carpet, and to where you are right now, from that perspective, because now when I look at you, all I see is growth and lightness, and this really beautiful attitude of embracing life. That's what I see when I look at you now. And it is such a shift from when I first met you and when we first had a conversation. That was already past that lowest point, because I started loving life after loss in 2019. And I believe I met you shortly after that. It wasn't too long after I started. And I think you even joined the very first experience that I ran the program. And I
It was,
remember
yeah.
the heaviness that you carried around you, to when I look at you now, it's complete polar opposite. There's
I was
lightness,
pretty
there's
heavy back
smiling, and
then.
I absolutely love it. So from that point where you are now, and for everyone who has listened to this, knowing where you've come from, what is it that you want to say to people who are sitting there watching this going like, yeah, great, good on you, Rob, I'm happy for you, but I have no idea how to even get there, how to even get started? What is it that you would like to say to them? Yeah, I'm just going to leave it there. What would you like to share with them? Some words of Rob's wisdom
Yeah,
here.
it can always get worse. And like that thing I said about it's what we make of it. And so, like, looking for the good things, like, develop a habit of, like, understand, take a look at, the way people think. And it's like, it's easy to be negative, to start a conversation. Oh, weather's a little rough out there today, or it's a beautiful day if it's sunny. But usually, like, when I lived up in northeastern US, that was easy to complain about the weather. And right. And I just and happiness is your birthright. Okay. You have to be. And we're all a part of, this is how I see it. We're all a part of one universal source, right? We don't know how we got here, but if you follow all the eclectic teachings and some of my own intuition, just, like, we're all one, we're all a unit, and we all have a right to joy and greatness. And when we're happy, our bodies are putting out an energetic frequency, Marie. Like, that's how empaths say they can feel what's going on, And I will say that as an empath, I've learned, like, when I feel things, I'm like, I had a guy draw a picture of me like Rambo, because I'm like, just sending out peace and love. I'm like, peace and love, It's just like, but I just feel like, even when I didn't understand what that was, I hadn't even heard of empaths, right? But I would feel things when I was in the market. And I think, well, if that's really going on, just send them peace, blessings, help them understand good things in their life. And I had to take my own advice.
Yes,
it was really
I
hard.
think that's the biggest one. Yeah.
It's really hard to do when, like, when things fell apart. For me, it was a situation of trying to stand up for myself, but I didn't know how to do it. So I couldn't speak clearly or calmly, and I would lose my patience. And, I understand that now, but at the time, it's like, I fought for myself. I stood up for myself, and I lost everything. So I could have taken that as, God standing above me with a wound up fist saying, don't get back up. Spoke up for yourself. I put you in your place. Stay there. And I really did feel that way. It took me a long time. I was in Costa Rica when I realized how heavy that was, and but it's not the truth, and if the truth, and if you know it logically, it's true. And it feels like, recognize if it feels like a lie, and moving on to that. Like, all right, here's one thing. So when you're happy, that energy that your body puts out is a resource for others. They have available to experience it. It goes into the earth sends it back out. The earth is grateful for it. When you're not helping anything. And so, I chose through this experience to be a gift to the world and put me where I need to be. And, and every time I just remind myself, make me available to be of service, get my own thoughts, my own things out of the way, and help me understand myself clearly. When I
Rob,
accept myself as beautiful, the earth, the world shines it back at me. I've noticed that every time. And yeah, it's hard. Don't worry about it. It's still okay. So think about that.
I love that. It's hard to worry about it. It's still okay. I think the most beautiful part for me in this whole message that you put out there is that it really comes back to choices. It really comes back to taking your own advice, in particular when you are working in that field like you do, like I do. People often say that to me when I have a bad time, or when I have a phase of, I don't even call it bad time anymore, to be honest. It's such a weird thing when I say them, like, that doesn't sit right. When I have a time of intense growth, let me put it that way, that's when people often say to me, Marie, you need to watch your own stuff a little bit more often, you need to watch your own videos. And I'm like, yeah, it's so true, because often as an empath in particular, we need to be really careful, because we tend to take on emotions. We tend to hold space for people to help them heal, and then not take care enough of our own love tank that is filled, that we are in a content space, in a good space. And as you said, when we are happy, it goes into the earth and it radiates all over the place. And I think that's what I want to take as a takeaway. We are way beyond time now, but I really didn't want to stop that any earlier. But this is the most beautiful message for me that I'm taking away from your beautiful member spotlight here. Thank you so much for being here and sharing that, because for me, the biggest takeaway is that when we allow the healing in, that's where we help everyone, including ourselves, the most. And I think it really happens in the collective, when we are in community that supports us, that holds space for us, that shares the love, like we do here in Loving Life After Loss. I truly love that. I love what's happening in our happy healing sessions, the connection with people, the being there, holding space and creating that space for others to be held in. And I'm very, very grateful of that in our community. I'm very, very grateful for you. I just want to say thank you so much for being here. If you have any final words for our group here, then now is your chance, Rob.
That was the biggest thing I wanted to say is, what you put out goes into the earth, comes back, and it always comes back tenfold at a minimum. It comes back multiplied. And so if you're going to put anything out, put it out good. And if you don't know if you're doing it good, like I said, make yourself available to be of service. Like when you're happy, you're of service to this whole world, and always, and I'm grateful for you, because through this, you just did happen to be like something it's like, even if I forgot, then something you show up, ask me if I'm interested. So I do. And it's, believe that, it's out there and the resources come to you, the people come to you.
I'm a big believer in that too, whenever, and it's that whole beautiful thing, when a student is ready, the teacher will show up, and we go through both phases, sometimes we're the student, sometimes we're the teacher, but I believe we are always both, and to stay open with that, even when you teach, to still be that student, to still be open for learning and for healing. That to me is the most beautiful part in the journey. And with that being said, I'm super grateful for our connection, Rob. I'm really grateful that we have connected. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing what you did here, because maybe even if it's just for one or two people that listen to this and go like, you know what, I think I can do that, then it was already worth it. But I truly believe that you touch so many people with your story and with your beautiful example of growth. So thank you so much for being here. Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your time. And this is Rob and Marie signing off. Bye for now. Thank you.